Hi, I'm Lydia and I'm the youth minister here at Skipton Baptist Church. Now, over the summer, we are exploring the Armour of God that the Apostle Paul writes about in Ephesians chapter 6. Last Sunday, Joe talked about the belt of truth, and this week I have been given the lovely task of unpacking the breastplate of righteousness. I have to be honest, when Phil first asked me to speak on righteousness, my genuine and very devout response was, I don't even know what that is. So we ended up sitting down together and Phil agreed with me that it was a very complicated topic and suggested that I do a bit of digging. So we had a conversation, and when I asked for his personal insights, he simply said, yeah, so you've got a lot of looking into things to do. And so this kind of made me realise that most of us use this kind of jargon of righteousness and kind of larger Christianese words like that, and we don't always actually know what it means. And while I am just teasing Phil here, how mad is it that righteousness is mentioned around 213 times in the Bible? So it must be slightly important. And yet none of us, if we're completely honest, really know what it means. Now, like Phil, I'm not going to give you a clear answer to that. You'll be delighted to know. But I do hope that as we unpick a little bit together how righteousness plays a starring role across the breadth of God's story as we read it in the Bible, that we are able to let go of some of our preconceptions maybe about righteousness, and that we can start to kind of pull out some of the core threads that will help us to make a little bit more sense of this kind of weird, big concept, jargony type word, righteousness. So let's crack on, because we've got a few thousand years at least of God doing stuff to get through. And Catherine told me I'm only allowed 4 hours. So let's get going. Now, before I delve into some dense theology with you, I have a very important and profound question that I would love it if you would take a minute to reflect on. And that is this: how do you feel about to-do lists? Do you live by them, love them, wouldn't be without them, wouldn't maybe cope without them? Relate to that. Do you occasionally use them from time to time? Like when you're packing for holiday or a particularly stressful event or something, but you're otherwise kind of neutral? Maybe you are an absolute anarchist and you never make a to-do list and you just go where the day takes you. I am incredibly jealous and also terrified of that option. Now, it will not surprise anyone who has spoken to me even just once briefly to hear that I have a few traits of ADHD. So basically there's a part of your brain which is in charge of organising and prioritising tasks. I imagine that if you were to visit that place in most people's heads, you would find a structured and organised hive of activity with sort of a manager at a front desk that you could come and speak to. Now, if you were to visit that place in my head, you would find an empty desk with a handwritten note with the words, "Gone for coffee, back in a bit," scribbled on it, and maybe a little smiley face. There would not be much structure, it's pure chaos. So I, as someone who is naturally not very good at prioritising or organising myself, I absolutely live for to-do lists. I don't just mean sometimes, I mean like for work, for days off, for chores, for holiday packing, for but literally everything. I have them on my phone. I currently have a to-do list in 4 notebooks and I think 3 separate apps, as well as alarms. Sometimes one of the items on my to-do list will literally just be to complete another separately stored to-do list, like a little appendix. Now, this may sound stressful to you, but don't worry, I have come up with a very effective coping strategy taught to me by the wonderful, incredibly organised Sarah Dunn, which is stickers. Now, if you're not a stickers person, God bless you, but I can't relate. So somehow I've found it is less intimidating to look at our to-do list if there is a little capybara sticker somewhere on it, smiling at you. I showed this to one of our young people recently, and they pointed out to me that for ultimate de-stressing, I had the sticker in the wrong place. It was sort of next to my list, and they suggested very wisely, I've raised them well, that to really keep it a calming experience looking at a to-do list, I needed a giant sticker smack bang over it that covered up all of the jobs that I needed to do. Very, very proud moment for me listening to that. We all have to-do lists, I think, if we're honest, even if they're in our heads. And there are also the unspoken and, dare I say, slightly more stressful to-do lists, like the well-being to-do list, so making sure you eat right, move a bit, talk to people, take time to be grateful, etc., etc. And for those of us who are have a religious belief or faith, perhaps the most stressful of all is the religious to-do list. Oh yes, the tiny churchy part of your brain, which is always going, have I prayed enough? Did I do it right when I prayed? When did I last read the Bible? Oh my gosh, why am I stuck in Leviticus? Should I have been nicer to those people when they were really annoying when I was stuck in traffic? How do I be still with God and not get distracted by everything else going on? That one I especially relate to. Should I be thinking about fasting? And oh, good grief, another week has passed and I could not for the life of me manage to take a Sabbath. Welcome, my friends, to the religious to-do list. The most guilt-inducing of all of the to-do lists, and the one that we often find ourselves frantically ticking things off of in a desperate bid for righteousness, for being blameless and being enough in God's sight. Now, it may surprise you to know that we, as frenzied 21st century Western Christians, have not actually invented the concept of the religious to-do list. In fact, I genuinely think if you mentioned this idea to an ancient Israelite, they would probably have a sympathetic smile or a small cry with you about it, to say the least. Because according to Jewish tradition, the ancient Israelites had 613 laws. Most of us struggle with the 10 Commandments, okay? That is 248 do's and 365 don'ts. That is quite a to-do list. The burden for them of doing things right was a very, very heavy one. Now, righteousness is mentioned about 136 times in the Old Testament, and at first glance, it's a lot to do with making the right choices through kind of practical right words and right actions. By doing the right things, the idea was that they can earn their righteousness. They could climb this kind of imaginary ladder, for want of a better way of thinking about it. And then once they got to the top, they could achieve right standing before God in his presence. They could then be fully loved, fully holy, fully blameless. Now, part of this approach really pleases my inner problem solver and fixer, because there's a simple equation that people use in strategy and vision and kind of purpose statements, which is called X to Y by when. Which basically sounds like algebra, but don't panic, it's really not. It literally just means, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And when do we want to get there? So for them, this was from being unrighteous to righteous by the next available opportunity, all of the time, forever. And by doing all of the things and ticking all of the boxes, then we're going to climb the ladder to God's presence. Happy days. We're in control. The responsibility is all on us. It's completely merit-based. That just means that you're rewarded based on your achievements or your lack of achievements. It sounds a lot like Western 21st century culture, if I'm honest, and it works. Only it doesn't. And how do we know? Well, firstly, we know the religious to-do list didn't work for ancient Israel because God said so. Now, please tell me it's not just me that when I read the prophets in the Bible, they seem really miserable. And I often flick through to try and get to the bit at the end when they have like a message of hope. But most of it is quite tragic and quite, just really miserable. Because the role of a prophet is to feel and hear the heart of God for people and to communicate that with the people. So in the case of ancient Israel, a lot of the time, trying to do this righteousness thing in their own strength, trying to follow all these rules and laws, they just couldn't do it. They couldn't stand before God as holy or as blameless in their own strength. And we know it because scriptures like Isaiah 1:21 says of Israel, "She was once full of justice. Righteousness used to dwell within her." Used to. Ow. And Hosea 4:1-3 is even titled in our Bibles, God's Case Against Israel. And it says this, "Hear the word of the Lord, people of Israel, for the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land. There is no truth, no faithful love, no knowledge of God in the land. Cursing, lying, murder, stealing, and adultery are rampant. One act of bloodshed follows another. And for this reason, the land mourns. Everyone who lives in it languishes, along with all the wild animals and the birds of the sky. Even the fish of the sea just disappear." Cheerful, you're welcome. Put simply, people could not meet God's standards of justness through their right acting, right thinking, and right speaking in their own efforts. They kept falling short and they kept grieving God's heart. So they couldn't stand before him as righteous. And the second reason that we know it doesn't work is that God has given the Israelites this system by which they can atone or make up for all of the times that they can't do it on their own and they can't climb this ladder and they fall short. And they do this through the means of sacrifices. And they have to do these sacrifices a lot. In Numbers 28, verse 3-4, the Israelites are commanded to sacrifice 2 lambs a year old without defect as a regular burnt offering each day. Sorry to all the vegetarians out there. And even more depressingly, this still isn't enough to make up for their to-do list failures. In the letter written to the Hebrews, a very long time after this has happened, after Jesus' death and resurrection, in this letter we read the reflection that the law, by which I mean these instructions that were given to Israel to try and be righteous, the law can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sins? But in these sacrifices, there's a reminder of sins every year. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats, sorry, vegetarians again, to take away sins. And it is a bit miserable at this point. This is why sometimes when I read the prophets and some parts of the Law and Old Testaments, I think, oh my goodness. I mean, you're trying to kind of pull out these shreds of hope in this part of God's story. And there are many. But one key feature of all of this section of God's story is that people cannot, no matter how hard they try, achieve righteousness alone. And even the solution that God gives them to this can't fully solve their problem. Now, if with me you are despairing slightly, don't worry, there is good news. Sorry if this is a spoiler, but that good news is, Sunday school answer, Jesus turns up. Thank goodness. God, knowing full well that we can never climb up to him, comes down to us. The Father, out of his great love for his people, sends the Son to be born and live among us as Jesus. Mind-bogglingly fully God and perfect, and fully human with all the same temptations and trials. Now, what I find really quite dramatic and quite significant in all of this is that all of the lambs that the people of ancient Israel offered in place of their sins could never be enough to break out of their cycle of trying to climb this ladder up to God and failing and falling down miserably. And then we have the prophets calling Jesus a lamb sent from God. God sends a perfect lamb of his own to be offered instead, to break the cycle once and for all. And that lamb is Jesus. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. I'm just going to read that again because I think it's one of those verses that we can kind of like let wash over us and be like, oh, that's nice. But hang on a second, because if we actually grasp what this is getting at, I think it's quite profound. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. In him we might become righteous. Not in us, in him. When the Father in heaven looks at the Son, he sees him as wholly his, wholly righteous, more worthy to come into his presence than the angels. Which makes me think, how on earth could we be able to be seen by God as holy, as righteous, as blameless children of God? How could we be invited into an intimacy of relationship with him that even angels are unqualified for? How on earth could our little religious to-do lists and our slightly pious, forgive me, actions earn us this status before the Father? And the answer is that they can't. Only by Jesus. Only by God's mercy in choosing to see us through the lens of who Jesus is are we righteous in his sight. It makes me think of this beautiful song by Rend Collective that goes, by grace alone somehow I stand, where even angels fear to tread, invited by redeeming love before the throne of God above. It always absolutely blows my mind that because of Jesus, we have more status before God than angels do. Just let that sink in for a minute. It doesn't seem right to me, because Jesus invites us to share in his death and resurrection, and it means that we also get to share in his status before the Father. Loved as the Father loved Jesus. Blameless as he sees Jesus to be, righteous as he judges Jesus to be. Isn't that insane? When we accept the gift of Jesus into our lives, the Father chooses to view us through the lens of Jesus, his Son. What incredible grace is that? I genuinely think that if we truly grasp the depths and the implications of our righteousness in Christ, it would have a staggering impact on our lives. So, what is this breastplate of righteousness about? This metaphorical piece of armour given to us by God to put on in this ongoing spiritual battle that we find ourselves in. I want to suggest that maybe it isn't just Jesus or the Holy Spirit helping us do the right thing or make the right choice. Although as we continue to love and follow God, we do find that our desires and our hearts start to align more with his for sure. But what if this breastplate of righteousness isn't a religious to-do list of things that we can do to climb up to God and stand blameless before him, saying, look, I put on my armour of good choices, and I did it, with the triumphance that we have when we tick something off a to-do list and we go, yes, I did it. If it was about that, I honestly don't think any of us would be able to stand and say so with any real integrity. What if instead this breastplate is the righteousness of Christ, not of us? As Joe reminded us last week, this armour is not ours. We didn't earn it, we didn't make it, God did. And he gifts it to us because he knows that we need it. So we can put on the breastplate of Christ's righteousness and wear it instead of having to wear our own. Thank goodness. So a question for the pedantic among us. Why a breastplate? Why not this probably isn't Roman warfare, why not like a grenade or, I don't know, some nice socks or something? Well, I wonder if it's because God knew it was our hearts that needed protecting when it comes to this, when it comes to righteousness, because it's so tied up with how we see our worth. Putting on the breastplate of Jesus' righteousness protects us from those heart wounds that happen when we try to wear our own flimsy breastplate of righteousness instead. And that often translates as us just trying really, really hard to get it right all the time. It's exhausting. And the wounds that we get from trying to do it on our own will be different for all of us. But I wonder if they often sound something a little bit like, I just keep getting it wrong. Or I can't do it anymore, I'm exhausted, I've tried absolutely everything and nothing's worked. Or what's wrong with me? Or I'm a failure. If only God knew what I was really like. Or even God could never love someone like me. I'll be honest with you, I have probably thought or felt all of these at some point. Maybe you recognise something there that resonated with you as well. And let's be real, it hurts. It hurts to feel those things, those wounds hurt. This is why when you go into a battle, you have armour. This is why God has given us this armour, because when we face battles and we face struggles, things are coming at you, and if they hit you, it hurts. I wonder if God gives us this metaphorical breastplate of righteousness to wear so that when our hearts are attacked, instead of being brutally wounded, we're able to instead somehow say things that sound a bit more like, I can't do it all, but that's okay, because Jesus has already done it all for me. I don't feel like I'm enough right now, but that's okay because Jesus is always enough. Or, yeah, God knows everything I've done, the good, the bad, the ugly, but because of Jesus, he sees me as blameless. And even God loves me with the same love that he has for his son, Jesus. Or as 2 Corinthians puts it, God made him who had no sin to be sin for me, so that in him I might become the righteousness of God. Some of you might be wondering, how do we put on this breastplate of righteousness? And let me just say now, if you are now worrying about doing righteousness right, desist. Stop it. That's not the point. I'm not going to give you a to-do list of things now that you can do to climb up to God, because that really defeats the point of what we've just been saying. And I don't believe that that was God's plan for you ever. What I am going to do is to invite you, wherever you're up to in your week watching this, whatever you're doing, whether it's the hoovering, the washing up, the dog walk, to take a minute with God. Take a minute with God, your Father, who loves you. Now, it's kind of a youth thing that we do. We try to take some time at the end of a session together, but quietly and in our own heads. We'll put some music on and we'll just, we'll get our journals out or whatever, and we'll just take a moment to be still with our own thoughts with God and to come to him in the quiet with the honesty of where we're at. So where are you at on this scale of climbing up to God? Imagine it's like a ladder. Where are you at? Are you sat somewhere to the side, contentedly resting in the righteousness of Jesus bought for you at a price? Are you trying to climb up and it's all slippery and you're like, this is a nightmare? Are you stood there looking at it like, there's no point even trying because I'm never going to make it anyway, I'm not good enough? Where are you at? And what might your Father who loves you be whispering to you in that place? Go and enjoy some time with God.